We're very honored to have Venerable Robina Curtin visiting us this week, and it's the second time she visits Miami. For those of you who don't know her, Venerable Robina has been ordained since the late 1970s, and has worked ever since then for the organization FPMT, founded by Lama Thubten Yeshi and Lama Zopa Rinpoche, whom Venerable Robina is very devoted, as well as His Holiness the Dalai Lama. She's been the director of Wisdom Publications and Mandala magazine.
Just editor.
Editor.
Not director.
Okay, editor.
Editorial director.
Editorial director. Yeah. And she teaches worldwide in different centers from the FPMT. She also leads annual pilgrimages to India and Nepal. There's actually a postcard outside for her next pilgrimage coming up in October, so you can take one, a postcard or a picture. And what else? Okay. Please silence your phones.
There you go. Okay. Okay, people. Happy to be here in Miami. Well, I always like to start with a little prayer. It's expressing two things. I can't see you all. I want to see you all. You have to move your chairs around or something. I don't know. I can't see Mercedes. You're hiding Mercedes. There you go. What to do? Anyway, that's okay. So this prayer expresses two things. So if anybody in the room already identifies with being a Buddhist, then it's the first two lines are reminding us of our kind of reliance on the Buddha. And the second two lines are really just stating kind of an altruistic purpose for our being together to listen to these ideas coming from the Buddha about life, about the mind, about happiness, about suffering, about life, basically. To see, and the way to listen is to listen to it as advice. I mean, you might take the advice. You're the boss, not Buddha. But it is advice. That's the way to listen to it. And the advice for what? Well, to help us, at least very minimum for the Buddha, is to become less neurotic, less depressed, less angry, more kind, more wise. Bottom line, is this. This is very much the Buddhist approach. We've all got this incredible potential. And that's really the point, just to listen with this in mind. Sangye charang choke chok namla jang cho badu dak nikyab suchi jagi chernyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye drupa shok sangye charang choke chok namla jang cho badu dak nikyab suchi jagi chernyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye drupa shok Sangye charang choke chok namla changcho badu dagni kyab suchi jagi chernyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye drupa shok. So, okay. So I think it's not wrong to say that the Buddha's expertise is the mind. Maybe that's sort of surprising to us because, I'm a Buddhist nun, I just sang a prayer. It's what we think of as religion, isn't it? And when we think religion, we think soul or spirit. Well, Buddha doesn't even use that word. Buddhists use the word mind. But the difference in his view of the mind, what it is, where it comes from, its characteristics, and crucially, its potential, are so radically different that you could practically use another word, In some ways, it's all very familiar. We'll talk about it, you'll see. It's very familiar words. But the Buddha's understanding of the mind is really quite unique. And the key thing about the mind for the Buddha, and this person who lived 2,500 years ago, is that this consciousness or this mind of ours, these thoughts, feelings, emotions, our unconscious, subconscious, instinct, intuition, this entire spectrum of our inner being, the Buddha would refer to that as our mind. He doesn't necessarily talk about the brain. Clearly the brain does a job. But he talks about the mind in a much more subtle way. We've got these grosser levels of mind, all our intellect, our feelings, our emotions. But we've got these other, more subtle levels of mind. And the Buddhist view, and this is where the whole idea of meditation comes in. And it's nothing mystical, I promise you. The Buddha, he came from this extraordinary tradition of these Indians, well before the Buddha, more than 3,000 years ago. It was the Dalai Lama who said, I remember reading recently, he said, that it was these Indians more than 3,000 years ago who were the ones who really began the investigation into the nature of self. So maybe we, in our Christian Jewish world, from the European side, we probably thought it was Mr. Freud 150 years ago who thought about the self. Well, these Indians 3,000 years ago. But what do we know? In our culture, we know nothing about India. We love the Greeks. Half our fancy words are in Greek, I think. But we don't know much about the Indians. And it really is extraordinary, actually, when you think about it. These Indians, before the Buddha, they had this amazing tradition then, this detailed description of the mind, an understanding of the nature of self, extraordinary philosophers, extraordinary thinkers. And they were the ones who created this meditation skill that the world kind of vaguely knows these days as mindfulness meditation. But they developed this extraordinary sophisticated skill that it's based on, that actually it's this remarkable skill that enables a person to completely subdue the grosser levels of all the conceptuality, all the crazy emotions, all the thoughts, and to go to these more subtle levels of our mind. Not just to become not just for some mystical reason, but for a very practical reason. So Buddha came out of that amazing tradition, and then he diverged in his own direction, which is why now we have Buddhism, but it was mainly in relation to his own findings, his own direct experiential findings himself about the nature of self, what we really are, what our potential is, So the essence of it for the Buddha, then, the point of it, what he's found from his own experience, because Buddha's not a creator. He doesn't assert a creator. There's no concept of a creator in Buddhism. I don't know whether these days will be here, we're going to go into this. But the essence of it is for the Buddha, this human mind of ours, he has found from his own experience that we've got this remarkable potential to unpack and unravel the contents of our mind, which normally for us is just kind of emotional chaos, isn't it? I mean, we know from the second we wake up in the morning till the second we go to sleep, this is just constant thoughts, unceasing thoughts. They're just there all the time. And we call that our unconscious. And it's only when some of that stuff comes to the surface where we have these strong emotions, We just assume it is just chaos in its nature, unable to be understood. We have all these weird dreams. We have no idea what's going on in our minds most of the time. So the Buddha's got this view that we can really learn to unpack and unravel the contents of our mind. And don't think of it as mystical. It's not. It's hard work. As Lama Yeshe puts it, to learn to be our own therapists. And why would we want to do that? So we can sort it out and start to really begin to become super familiar with the contents of our thoughts, feelings, and emotions so that we can begin to radically change them. And what's he mean by that? Something really simple. To become less attached, less neurotic, less depressed, less angry, less jealous. All the stuff that we know is so familiar that makes us all crazy. But he says we can learn to radically change and reconfigure these parts of ourselves. It's a very practical job. It's the hardest job we'll ever do for various reasons, which we'll talk about. And then not only can we lessen all the neuroses and therefore become a more happy, more wise person, but we can also grow our intelligence, our kindness, our confidence, our love, our compassion, the stuff that we also know so well, and that we know that is the nice stuff. I mean, speaking very simply, if you say depressed, angry, jealous, resentful, you don't go, oh, wow, that's great, more of that, please. Of course not. We hate it. And you say love, compassion, intelligence, and confidence, we get it, These words are really simple. But the Buddhist approach is to really understand this stuff in a way that's I would suggest is quite unique, And one of the key things for the Buddhist approach is that we are indeed the product of our world. Mummy made us, Daddy made us, bad things happen, good things happen. But I think our emphasis in modern psychology is not true, is hugely on trying to point out all the things that go wrong in the outside world. In other words, intuitively, we tend to blame the outside world for both our suffering and our happiness. We assume the causes are out there somewhere. So when we go to our therapist and discuss our problems, we're looking back into the past, isn't it? For like some needle in a haystack, looking for the cause of the problems. Why do I get angry? Why do I get depressed? Why do I choose crummy boyfriends? Whatever it might be. We always assume that the external world, the events, the people, the things that happen to us, that these are the main cause. That's our model. That's our psychological model. That's our neuroscience. But not for the Buddha. He says, sure, the outside world plays a role. Of course it does. People are terrible to us. People are kind to us, both. But the Buddhist approach is that we have the power, we have to have the will to do it, to actually to look into the mind itself. Not the object of the anger, but the anger. Not the object of the love, but the love. Not the object of the outside. Yes, know about those. But the key thing, the expertise for the Buddhist approach, is to really know your own mind. There's a saying in Buddhism, if you can change something, please change it. But what if you can't? Then what? And that's often the nightmare for us, So you can be in a crummy relationship or in a lousy job We stay miserable, we get angry, we get resentful, we can't stand our colleagues, we can't stand the boss. So we don't even know we can change the job. We're too scared to change. We lack of security, fear of what people think. Oh, I can't do that. I won't get another job. Oh my goodness, I can't. And yet we also don't know we can change our mind. And that's the part that sounds so simple, but is the hardest job we'll ever do. But that's the point in Buddhism. And it's not some kind of secret. We kind of know it. We understand it. We do it actually. But we don't really do it in a clear, coherent, consistent way. We don't really see it as a main method. But this is the Buddhist approach, you know. No matter how bad the world is, we can find a way by reconfiguring our approach to the world, our approach to life, the way we interpret things. That's the basis of our contentment. That's the basis of our own clarity. That's the basis of our happiness. I mean, the words are simple. These words are simple. We get them intellectually. But it's probably the hardest job we'll ever do. And that's because instinctively, my mother didn't have to teach me when I was a little girl. If my sister was mean to me, she didn't have to teach me to be angry. She didn't have to teach me to blame my sister. I knew it already, you know. It was kind of instinctive. And that's something really primordial in all of us. As soon as something goes wrong, what's the problem, Rabina? Why are you crying? I'll give detailed descriptions of my lousy boyfriend, you know. But tell me about your problem. Then I'll say, well, I just did. I told you about my lousy boyfriend. No, but the Buddhist approach is no, talk about the anger. Understand what is going on in your own mind. Not a description of what your boyfriend's doing, which is what we think, but actually learning to understand the conceptual stories, really. The key way Buddhism understands the mind is we have all these emotions, but we don't notice them until the words are vomiting out the mouth. You don't notice you're depressed until you can't get out of bed one morning, you know, because we don't pay attention to what's going on in here before it comes to the surface. And that's one of the key, very practical approach. You know, the Buddhist approach is we have to learn to pay more attention, not just to the cars on the road and the driving, what the husband's saying and the kids and the boss, but we've got to pay attention to what's happening in here, which is responding to that stuff. That's the skill. That's the skill. And it's not mystical. It's just practical. But it takes time to do it because we'd rather blame the traffic. I'd rather blame the boss. I'd rather blame the husband. And even if you're happy, why are you happy, Rabina? Oh, it's my husband's fault. He's so kind to me. So in a sense, we blame people for making us happy as well. In other words, we see the causes is out there. This is very deep inside. It's very instinctive. And it feels like the truth. And yes, they play a role. If someone's kind to you, you can't say they don't play a role in your happiness. Of course they do. But we believe intuitively that's the main cause of why I'm happy. And then if a person's mean to us, we believe that's the main cause of why I'm suffering. All the Buddha's view is saying, no, it's more nuanced than that. You can actually learn to work on your mind. So this is why, for me, I found one of the jobs I did for many years is run a non-profit working with people in prison, Liberation Prison Project, still going. But it began in like 1996 when I was based in California editing Namdrol magazine, one of the magazine of our organization. I got a letter from this young Mexican from Los Angeles, Arturo. He was in one of the top security prisons in California, and that was the beginning of a project that's still existing now, like 22 years later. But basically, he was this young guy, been in gangs since he was, in gangs since he's 11, in prison since he's 12, and then tried in and out of prison as a juvenile, and then as an adult, tried as an adult at the age of 16, then got given 3 life sentences because the sentencing is so outrageous. I think the same here. So he was the beginning of this project. He wrote, and then he read a Buddhist book, was interested in the Buddhist approach, and so then people wrote, and after a year I had 40 people, and it grew from there, So for me, I found it such a powerful experience because that's a situation that you can't change. We're not imprisoned in our job. We're not imprisoned in our husband's house. We're not imprisoned with our family, but it's as if we are. Really, the feeling of hopelessness we tend to have and the feeling of anger or hurt or depression or fear, it's as if we might as well be in prison because we don't realise we could walk out any day. We really don't believe we can. Well, these people in prison, they can't walk out. You really cannot change the outside. You cannot choose your friends. You cannot choose your roommates, So it truly is prison in that sense. But what I found so powerful, giving the Buddhist tools to these guys in prison who wrote to us, because we'd get at some point we're getting like 1,000 letters a month from people in prison, that because they realised their back was against the wall, they didn't have a choice. They couldn't reverse their death sentence. They couldn't stop the 30-year sentence. They knew this is their life. So they didn't have a choice but to change their minds. And that's the point that I found so powerful, And actually, I always quote a story. It's actually a woman in Florida I read about it years ago. in the 70s, she was hitching. She was a hippie. Hitching with a hippie husband, hippie kids. Got picked up by 2 guys. The guys got stopped by the police. The guys killed the police and blamed the hippies. I don't think she's written her memoir and things. It's very moving. And really, for me, the most outrageous example of what I'm trying to say. She was this I think she wasn't a Buddhist. She did yoga and different things in prison, you know. She got out eventually after 17 years. But her husband got executed. I mean, you hear about this all the time, you know. You look at all the different people trying to help, you know, the justice system in this country is pretty ridiculous. Do you know that there's The Economist, there's a basic number, a figure that everyone accepts, you know, in this United States. That the United States has 5% of the world population, but it's got 25% of the prison population. So a quarter of all humans on this planet who live in a prison live in the United States, you know. It doesn't mean they're all monsters, on the contrary. It's kind of outrageous. And apparently 50% of all lawyers in the United States, of the whole planet. That's what I heard from reading. It's the right country. Anyway, the point is, the sentencing, I mean, I don't want to go on about it, I don't want to be political about it, it doesn't matter. But the part that I found so moving, and this woman is an example. I mean, I've got friends on death row. I've got people who've got 30-year sentences who know they won't get out alive, you know, who have the same approach. But you realise we've got the power to change our mind. I mean, these words are so simple. These words are not complicated. But somehow, when you're in those situations, you've got 2 choices: to completely go crazy, get depressed, because I mean they're garbage dumps. You don't want to live in a prison, I promise you. But you can't change it, so you got this choice to change your mind. And it sounds so easy. It just sounds so easy, but it is the hardest. And this woman was so extraordinary. I think she has such intelligence, such emotional intelligence. I don't know. She was very humble, and she had this extraordinary kind of patience. She didn't have much anger, you know, which we almost think is suspect in our culture. Because she was innocent. Husband executed. I mean, you can't even bear it. Look at the things that people accuse us of. The person at work doesn't like us and says we did something we didn't do. I mean, we go nuts. They were accused of murdering 2 policemen. Because you're the worst animal on the planet if you kill a policeman. And finally, after 17 years, she got out. But the point is, at some point, she said, this is what it sounds so cute, but it's so moving, you know. She said, at some point, I realised I could not change anything. But they couldn't take my mind from me. So I decided, I'm not a prisoner, I'm a monk. I'm not in a cell, I'm in a cave. Now, it sounds almost like romantic, you know, you like to read about these things. But just look at our own lives, look at the misery we have, the people we don't like, the people who are mean to us, people at work, and the world is full of people who are mean to us. It's always the way the world is. People who are unkind, make life difficult, criticise us, whatever it might be, who leave us, children who reject us, parents who reject us, I mean, husbands who leave you for a younger version. Look at the world, you know, like, look at the world. It is unbearable, if you think about it, in ordinary terms. No wonder we all go crazy, no wonder. But when we truly believe the only, you know, the causes are all there, and there's nothing I can do about it, that's the hopelessness, that's the despair we've all got. And that's a belief we have. It's a belief. It's instinctive, but it's a belief. So this is not a holy thing. I mean, that woman, she had the intelligence to realise that she had the choice not to go crazy. At the same time, I read about some guy, also on death row, also innocent, who, as far as we're concerned, was normal. He went completely out of his brain, raging daily. I did not rape and kill that woman. And that's how we have this kind of vindictiveness, and we think, well, of course we understand why he's like that, and it's true. But if you said to him, well, you know, sweetheart, there are ways you can learn to be less angry, people would think you're insane. Because it's right to be angry. I have a right to be angry. I am right to be jealous. I am right to be resentful because he did it to me. We believe that in our bones, you know. And this is what tortures us. So this is really not a religious one. Don't think of it as religious or holy. It's completely practical. You know, Buddha's got all these ideas about karma, reincarnation. I'm sure the weekend we're going to go into all this. There's no question we will. But this is something where you can be a communist and accept this view, you know. Honestly, you know, and I don't care whether you think your mind is your brain or it's in your toenail. I don't care. It doesn't matter. We all know. We all kind of know that we can decide to think differently about something. Because that's all we're saying here. That woman decided to think differently about her nightmarish situation. So the way she thought differently was to think in a way that didn't make her crazy. I mean, it's so intelligent if you think about it. But it's unbelievably hard. Because the other stuff, the anger, the hurt, the resentment, the blame, the jealousy, the depression, are so spontaneous in us. And these words are kind of cute and simple. I mean, in modern psychology, we have much more complicated terms, making up new psychological illnesses every day. Bipolar, IDAD, DDID, this, that, PS, something or other, all this stuff. Buddha hasn't changed his tune in 2,500 years. The same old boring words: love, compassion, depression, anxiety, attachment, jealousy. We know these words. These are the ones we use intuitively. And the Buddhist view of the mind is about this stuff. It's kind of fascinating. And that's the point about it. From this perspective, just this view of understanding your own mind. It's not a belief. It's practical. It's not belief. It's practical. It's practical. But the key. So, what are some of the obstacles then to hearing these words and wanting to do it? Well, the first obstacle I think is the instinctive, the habit that we have. It's very deep. Just like when I was a kid, I just naturally knew my sister was the cause of my problem. Yes, I knew I was angry. Of course, I was. Yes, I am angry, but it's her fault. That's so that concept, that view is so deep in our bones, so instinctive. I'm happy. Why? Because she was kind to me. I'm unhappy. Why? Because she was mean to me. So it's so natural that we think this. So the Buddhist understanding of the states of mind that are related to this, this cute word attachment. The Buddha's saying we've got this deep, instinctive, deeply primordial. We're born with it. Assumption. Somehow this kind of like an emotional hunger that somehow makes us feel that we're a bit separate and don't have enough, aren't satisfied. So naturally this attachment causes us to always think there's got to be something out there such that when I get it, it'll fill up the gaping hole. This is very primordial in all of us, So then on the basis of that assumption of I must get what I want every second, which is what it is, then the millisecond I don't get what I want, the mean word, the unkind person, the red light, the husband leaving me, whatever, however good or bad, however heavy, then the natural logic is that's why I'm suffering. And so then anger and depression come, So really the understanding in Buddhist psychology, understanding like attachment and anger, these simple words, there's very it really goes very deep, the ability to understand these states of mind. So one of the main obstacles to not wanting to understand these or to go more deep in them is because I think it's I'm allowed to be angry. I'm allowed to be depressed. It's not my fault. It's very deep inside us. So then because of that, then we don't pay attention. Why would I pay attention to my mind? I'm paying attention to my lousy husband. He's the problem. So we don't pay attention here. And this is a practical issue. So the key approach, the Buddhist approach, and the fact is Buddha's not a creator. He didn't make this up. Many people understand this. He just happens to, I think, be an expert at it. That's all I would suggest. But the Buddhist approach is you've got to start to pay attention to the responses in here, to the responses. But the second problem there is we don't, I only notice I have a problem when I'm about to kill my husband. When the words are vomiting out the mouth and I'm raging angry. I'm really angry. What will I do about it? Well, it's a bit late to ask that. It's a bit like you're driving 100 kilometres an hour on the freeway and your wheels are about to fall off. What shall I do? Well, it's a bit late, isn't it? It's a really good analogy because you just don't hear about wheels falling off because we all know we have maintenance. You just don't hear about wheels falling off. But emotionally, we don't. It's like we don't have any maintenance. We have no idea we should be looking at our minds. We don't think this way. It just sounds boring. And we only notice we're angry when you're about to kill somebody. We only notice we're depressed when you can't go to bed one morning. So it's a bit late to then it's too much drama. So imagine if you had decent maintenance, and that means, practically speaking, this approach we're describing, to be conscious of what the hell is going on in here. And from the second you wake up until the second you go to sleep, there's just never stopping. So to get some skillful tools to pay attention to the thoughts and feelings and emotions before they vomit out the mouth, before you can't get out of bed one morning. It's a practical issue, but you've got to have a will to do it because our energy from the second we wake up is completely focused on the outside. That's just what we run to, automatically. It's always out there. But don't hear this as mystical. It is not, I promise. It's just plain intelligence, Because we know from the second we wake up, there's non-stop responses going on in here. But we wait till it's been triggered before we pay attention. Whereas if we can start to learn the skill, to pay attention, and then what happens is, as we develop this habit, it's just a new skill to learn. So if you have a little habit, like you start the day with a 5-minute focusing, I'm going to time a focusing meditation, where you're training your mind not to wander for 5 minutes. then naturally you bring that to bear in your daily life. So when you're driving the car, instead of only noticing the cars and then wanting to kill the guy when he comes in front of you, you're also aware of all the business going on in here. You're noticing, you're conscious of all the stories, all the dramas. And so you're able to reconfigure them. So it's really just being intelligent. It's like intelligence, being aware of what's happening in here before it gets to the mouth. It's not common. It's not mystical. There's incredible other approaches in Buddhism, but this is the fundamental one. So you've got to have a will to do it and to see the benefit of doing it. To see the benefit of doing it. And the other part of that is, when one of the mistaken ideas we have in the world about meditation, many misconceptions, because we only notice the stuff when it's really painful, and then we think of meditation as an alternative to a pill. So if I'm in love with my boyfriend, everything's working perfectly, I'm blissed out, and someone says you should learn to meditate, oh, but I don't have any problems, why should I? So we sort of assume meditation, like I said, is an alternative to a pill. So that means we don't use it until we get the headache. That's just like the wheels falling off, it's a bit late. No, it's not like that. It's a practical, intelligent ability to be conscious of what the hell is going on in your own crazy mind. That's all. You'd think it's reasonable. We understand this when it comes to intellectual stuff and creative stuff. We're geniuses at learning, becoming a scientist and becoming a musician and learning computer skills. We're using our intellect, but not becoming familiar with our emotions. We think that's kind of a mystery to us, It's very interesting. So that's the practical Buddhist approach. And the benefit, again, it's not holy, it's not moralistic, it's practical. The beneficiary, like that woman, the beneficiary was her. She couldn't change anything. She couldn't, this nightmare, this hell, treated like some animal in the prisons, Nobody believed a word she said. The husband got executed, lost the kids, everything. But she could see, and that needs unbelievable courage to do that. Because the tendency to feel victimized it's the irony of ego. We love to be a victim. We love to feel I'm allowed to be angry. I'm allowed to be depressed. I'm allowed to be this. We feel that. As if somehow you're allowed to stab yourself. Yes, you are. But how about seeing the disadvantages of it, And that's our problem. Anybody, if you see a person, let's say, who's really angry, to see them screaming and shouting, it's clear they're really distressed. It's so evident that they're distressed, And we're so disconnected from ourselves that if you pointed it out yourself when you're angry, when you're depressed, when you're anxious. We know we're anxious. We know we're depressed. We know we get jealous. We know we freak out. And we see it's painful. But then we explain the reason there's always something out there. So it's not my fault. But that's so bizarre, Who cares whose fault it is? So the simplest one, the most basic idea here is if you can be conscious, like that woman, be conscious of the pain our own emotions cause us. Forget the husband. Yes, he cheated on me. But that's what's hard. That's what's unbelievably, insanely hard, To not think about what the husband did, but to think about the anger instead. It's almost like impossible for us. But that's the trick. That's the skill. That's what woman was able to achieve. And so simply saying it, they couldn't take my mind from me. Luckily, she got out. Bonus. And then I heard that, I was so happy, then I heard that she went to Ireland at some point and was involved in some kind of Amnesty International conference there. And she met this guy who'd also been accused by the British, he was Irish, accused by the British of killing 2 policemen during the Troubles in Ireland. And he got out as well. So they met, and now they're living in Cork. Someone is sweet little old 75, 80-year-old living fat, sweet people. I'd say, whatever. I saw a video about them. They're so sweet. Kind, dear people. Living in a centre in Cork, running retreats for people who've come out of prison who've been wrongly accused. It was so kind, so dear. I was so happy for her. Anyway, now you can ask me some questions. Come on. If you'd like to. Did I speak too fast?
No.
I do probably, but never mind.
We're
So ask me
taking
some
it
questions.
in.
Hey?
We're taking it in.
Good, I'm happy. Do you have any questions?
So where's the ego?
What do you mean?
Where does it,
These are the voices of ego. Put it that way. The irony of ego in Buddhism is it's the stuff that makes us miserable. That's kind of panic-stricken. Look at, just analyze the gripping feeling when you're depressed, anxious, worried, jealous. These cute words. Just look at it's like you feel completely isolated, don't you? The whole world is out there. You feel completely isolated, locked in yourself. Your heart beats fast. It's like that's the symptom of ego. The irony of ego is not in the Buddhism. It's not you're a big fat strong person. Is that you're overwhelmed by this feeling of hopelessness and misery. Ego. The irony of ego is it's the misery, the anger, the hurt, the resentment, the pain, that it causes. But the trouble is when our ego stuff causes us to harm others, like we don't want to know about that whether they're suffering. But this is the Buddhist approach. That when you can understand your own fears and your own suffering, then you can have compassion for others. Because who harms others? Loving, kind people don't harm others. Wacky, freaked out, depressed, angry people harm others. So in the end, the stuff that causes us suffering is what causes us to even have any problems with our lives at all, isn't it? So imagine people who have really serious problems with their lives, who murder or terrorists or pedophiles. It's the same reason. The Buddhist view is you've got to know your own mind first, and then you'll have some capacity to know your own suffering. Not in a self-piteous way, but in a powerful way. Then we can begin to get some sense of the crazy world, and have empathy for other human beings. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So it's really almost a simplistic idea, I mean, I think in our culture, in our psychology, yeah, for sure, we give equal status to attachment, anger, pride, jealousy, low self-esteem, love, compassion, generosity, and intelligence. We sort of hope we'll have more of the good stuff and less of the bad. But we tend to think we're all born this way and we're all stuck with it. It's just the way I am. Like we're set in stone, This is just who I am. It's natural, we would say. And what we mean by natural is that you'd be unnatural if you didn't have it. So when you hear the Buddhist view, it sounds so abstract to us. The Buddhist idea is the word Buddha, Sanskrit, but the Tibetan equivalent, the word Sangye. The etymology of that word is very tasty. The sun, the first syllable of the word Sangye, this is the result. Buddha, this dude who lived 2,500 years ago, coming out of this amazing tradition of these genius Indian thinkers and meditators, he is telling us that this is what he has discovered for himself. He's not a creator. These teachings aren't from revelation from in the sky somewhere, but from his own experience. And what he's saying is, this word Sangye, it expresses it. Sang implies the total eradication from one's own being of all the neuroses, all the ego, all anger, all fears, all nonsense. Now that's completely insane in ordinary Western psychological terms. You go to a therapist and you ask for methods to please get rid of, give me some methods to get rid of all anger, all fears, all ego forever. I mean, they'll think you're mentally ill. Give you many pills to calm you down. But that's exactly what Buddha's saying. But it sounds so mystical to us. We don't have equivalent methods like that in our culture. That's why we think it's mystical. But not only that, sang, gay, implies the other word, implies a development to perfection of all the goodness, all the wisdom, all the clarity, all the intelligence. That's the Buddhist idea, long term, okay? Well, forget even the long term. That already implies something pretty radical, that we can radically change our minds. I mean, that's why it's amazing. These last 30 plus years, I think, the Dalai Lama, all the Tibetan scholars, have been involved with all the best scientists in the West, an organisation called Mind and Life. You see their website, mindandlife.org. And they've all been published. Some of the major findings about neuroplasticity, that you're not stuck with the brain you're born with. This is come as a result of experiments on the minds of meditators, which is exactly the point the Buddha's making. You're not stuck with the mind you're born with. You can change it. So that's very helpful that even the scientific views now are accepting. But, they did experiments on the brains of different people. Like just by thinking about compassion, you reconfigure your brain. So the whole essence of that idea is that you're not stuck with who you're born with, that we can radically change. And you've got to see, well, why would I want to change? The only reason to change if things aren't so good. If you're happy with anger, well, keep being angry. Don't change it, please. If you're happy being depressed and jealous, then don't bother changing it. But we tend to think that it's not possible because it's so instinctive. I mean, anger was like my middle name as a kid. So naturally we assume, because it comes naturally and because Mama didn't teach us to do it, then we have this assumption it's natural. And then, of course, in our materialist psychological models, we say it's natural. So we would say it's just how you are, it's normal. So we have these assumptions that we should never question. So it's quite a shock to hear this idea that you can be less angry, less depressed, less jealous. And then it feels confusing because these are emotions. We make emotions very concrete. So the key point in Buddhism, and this takes a while to see in yourself. So like me in my life, anger, the emotion of anger, exploding out of my mouth, getting upset easily, that kind of thing. because it feels emotional, which means, I feel it when it's in my body, when the mouth is shouting, the eyes are wide, the tears are coming, the words are spitting out the mouth, isn't it? So when it's physical, then it feels so real. And to think that, and then to understand the Buddhist approach is that when you start to know your mind well and you start to develop this skill of getting some focus and stepping out of your head for 5 minutes and beginning to pay attention, what you're paying attention to is you realize that anger, which is just the tip of the iceberg, that's the wheels falling off. That it's informed underneath it by these elaborate conceptual stories. And anger is an elaborate conceptual story. It's a viewpoint. It's the view of an innocent victim, So when it's so emotional, it's too late to change it. That's like the wheels falling off. So you've got to be able to see your mind before it gets to the emotional level. Because all those thoughts are building up inside. That's the unconscious that we just don't pay attention to. But that's what we have to pay attention to. And that's the skill in the Buddhist approach, that we can learn to go more deep into the mind and to unpack and unravel all the conceptual stories that inform the emotions. Of course, it's not going to change overnight, but that's the job. That's the job. It's a practical job, But of course, you've got to want to do it. Yeah, you've got to want to do it. You've got to see the advantages to yourself of doing it, Yeah.
Yes. You say that Buddhism is basically more practical, more logical.
Well, this level of the Buddha, this is the down-to-earth approach in Buddhism. There's more to Buddhism than this, but this is the heart of it in a way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
that's
that's
I
right.
was going to go.
The psychological
how
approach.
these two things work, because I see that Buddhism is also mystical. I mean, all these Buddhas with 3 eyes, 1,000 arms, and all.
No, well, that's probably culture.
So
I know
how these
how
two
do it all
things
work together. No, I understand. That's true. I know. 1,000 arms. That's true. Well, that's culture, isn't it? That's culture. I mean, like, you a Catholic or something?
I was, yes.
Yeah, well, I mean, I suppose you saw Our Lady and Saint the Joseph and all the different versions. I suppose that's mystical, but I suppose, but in one sense, okay, I was a Catholic too. I loved Our Lady. I was in love with God and Our Lady. I thought, anyway, never mind. So then, basically, okay, this is definitely not our culture. I utterly agree with you. Completely, look, there's 21 different Greek ladies, all called Tara. All these ladies with their nice breasts. And it's completely different. I agree. Totally, ridiculous. I agree with you, completely. But it's culture. It's come from India, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years ago. And then the Buddhists, kind of, some aspect of Buddhism then went to Tibetan in the 8th century. And this is a Tibetan expression of this culture that existed for thousands of years. And basically, these are different manifestations, visual representations of various psychological qualities. So this green lady represents the quality of power, of power and action. There's another one represents wisdom. All of these thousands of these different Buddhas, they all represent different psychological qualities, either that you want to develop, love, wisdom, compassion, or there's some of them, like this gorgeous red naked lady who's totally divine. She represents kind of purified desire energy. Another one represents purified anger energy. So it's actually psychology, although it's not the way we think of psychology. So there is a meaning to it all. And the approach in Buddhism is if there isn't a meaning, if it's just plain old ritual and esoteric, well then chuck it out. It's a load of rubbish. Because it's not our culture, it's clearly looking a bit weird. But there is logic to it all. But there's levels of Buddhist practice. This is the more esoteric level, but it's still logically to do with psychology. But you take these practices as and when you feel you want. You don't have to sort of have 100%. You can take 1% if you like. Do you understand? So I'm talking about the most basic level, but this is an extension of what I'm saying. Other practices that you use using visualization and mantra that are methods for helping you use and work with and transform your anger, transform your different parts of your mind. That's the meaning of it all. Although it's not evident, I agree with you. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Yeah.
So I feel like I try to think things through on all these different pathways I can take before I have taken one path, maybe without thinking so much about it, and then I get that emotional response, like this isn't a good job or this is not good circumstances. So my question is there a space where our emotions or the discomfort or the suffering is a tool to make a change or set a healthy
Yeah, but the
boundary.
interesting point, I agree with you saying, the interesting point is though, this is my point, we wait till it gets to the level of emotion before we notice what's going on. All the Buddha's saying is we can learn to become so familiar with our own mind at a more subtle level where you can have such clarity and such wisdom. You don't wait till you have a drama in a job or a boyfriend when you realise he's a rapist. You'll know well beforehand and you won't make dumb choices. So in a sense, Buddha's saying we're as blind as bats right now because we're overwhelmed by attachment and anger and fears, and they drive us and we don't realise they're driving us. So when we really start to work on ourselves and lessen those at a more subtle level, we'll have such wisdom, such clarity that we'll be able to avoid problems. You'll have more wisdom and intelligence about it. Are you following my thinking? I don't think so.
No, I am, but I think sometimes maybe I overthink, and so.
No, I'm talking about a more. Yeah, I understand your point, but I'm talking as we progress on this path. The level of thinking I'm talking about is a much more subtle level, more based on wisdom and not emotion. That's what I'm saying. It's a kind of more clarity. So, yeah.
More perhaps there's a bit of fear in my thinking.
No, not so much instinct. It's more wisdom it's wisdom, but at a subtler level. I'm not trying to make it cosmic. It's not. It's a bit like.
I think I just figured it out. I think I probably have a lot of fear. Like there's, maybe some fear in all the overthinking that I do to prevent, and maybe even taking it back from that, right? Would be meditation or becoming more keen on what instinctively I need to do rather than overthinking it out of fear.
Well, I think I'm getting a bit lost now.
Yeah,
It sounds like
exactly.
overthinking. Just one step at a time, honey. So, okay, well,
I'll come back on that.
okay, good.
Yes. I have a small comment and a question that I don't know if it's clear. The comment is like, to your point, I feel like sometimes if I'm centered, let's say you go to a place and you see somebody losing completely themselves, I can see, oh my God, this person's suffering. She's, I can see from an outside that somebody is not centered, but sometimes if I'm triggered, I'm in that shoe. So I feel like I go in and out of that space of
Which
wisdom.
space? I'm a bit lost.
No, I go in and out of being able to be in a wiser space in which I can predict and say.
Yeah, we've all got some sense of it.
We go
the
in and
Buddhist
out,
view is
right?
we can get that constantly, not just in and out
Right.
of it. You can
So-
learn it like a skill.
Right.
So,
So you
you
go
learn
in and out until you learn it. So my
yeah, you learn from your experiences, don't you?
right. So the other question that was the real question is
Yeah.
like that I struggle with the acceptance. Like you said.
Acceptance.
Yeah, if you can change things, you
Yes,
change them.
go for it. Yeah.
So let's go into the change now. So you
That's right.
look at what point are you changing things because you're constantly looking for something better
Because we got to know your mind. You just have to know your own self.
versus,
That's where you have to learn to have your own understanding of yourself. I think all the time, what I'm talking here is a type of way we don't talk in our culture, I think. And that's like, we've got the ability to have an incredible, subtle, clear awareness of all the thousands of little voices in here that just seem to drive us, that end up noticing with their emotional level. It's not meant to be cosmic, but learning to have such clarity in our mind we can have. That's all. So that then you can know what is So the only way to understand this properly in the Buddhist view then is to look at the Buddhist model a little bit, which is quite distinct. I mentioned roughly, we can see all the neuroses, we know the neuroses, we recognize them, and then we know the good side. Well, Buddhism has this really clear distinction between these two parts of our mind. We see them all as just natural part of a person. We know that we just feel their natural part, so we don't try to distinguish. So, like, let's just say, I don't know, where's the boy? What's your name?
Hernan.
Who?
Hernan.
Hernan.
Yes.
Hernan.
Yeah.
How do I spell that?
Since I was born.
What, sweetheart? How do I spell it?
H-E-R.
Herman.
Herman.
Hernan.
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 It's Herman with an N.
Oh, with an N. Hernan with an N. Okay, good. So let's say he's my boyfriend. Okay. So the point is here. This is using this model of the neurotic states of mind and the good states of mind, which we all take for granted and assume they're equal parts, natural part of who I am. So what the Buddha is saying is the neurotic ones are why I'm suffering. They're the ridiculous ones, they're the voices of ego, they're the child in me, they're the victim in me, they're the ones that make me crazy and the ones that make me harm others. So he's saying we've got to learn to distinguish them from the other stuff. So I would say, so under the negative heading, you've got attachment. This simple, cute word, but in Buddhism it's a hugely massive state of mind that goes to really subtle levels. So basically attachment is this assumption from the time I'm born that I'm kind of like half a person. And so naturally, you're looking for something out there such that when you get it, it'll fill you up. So the classic one is to look for the other half, isn't it? I mean, look at us. The commonest thing all beings and all animals do is find another human being. So then my attachment is this massive neediness, like an emotional hunger that feels I'm not enough, I don't have enough. So naturally, it's going to go onto food, it'll go onto handbags, it'll go onto the shape of my body, but it's definitely going to go onto a boy, let's say in my case. Let's just say. So you're looking and you find your eyes land on this object. So this attachment is like berserk in us, and it's so spontaneous. It's writing 1,000 novels a second. We just don't realize it. It's so intense. It's driving so much of what we do, and it's this neediness and this hunger. So then it gloms onto him, and suddenly now I've finally found happiness, haven't I? I've finally I've found happiness. We talk about this. I'm not being mean about it. But this is extreme the way attachment works. It's neediness, it's emotional hunger, it manipulates, it expects, and then it possesses, and then it makes him look way more delicious than he possibly is. Ask his ex-girlfriend. You understand my point? We all know this. Now, along with this, okay, now put it this way. If I had just that, only attachment, but no access to love and kindness and compassion, I'd be a vampire. I would eat his blood and spit him out for breakfast. Then I'd go get another one. You look at anybody you know who's really selfish, they're really brutal people. You understand what I'm saying? Because they can't access their kindness, their love, and their patience. You get my point? So we have the virtuous qualities as well. But the trouble is we can't see the difference. So I can say I love Hannon, but basically 90% of it's attachment. And 1%, 5%, 10% might be wanting him to be happy. That's called love. Love's under the positive heading. It's altruistic, it's valid, it's interdependent, it's reasonable, and it's the source of any happiness I have at all. Attachment is a vampire. And any good I do for him is from my love. But attachment is manipulative, and it poisons my love. So when you in the beginning it is full of all this divine story, and then you start to live together, and then you start to see the faults. Then you find problems. And then the second he doesn't do what my attachment wants, then anger will come, and jealousy and resentment. I mean, look at the world. And my love is out the window. But if I have love, and I have more love than attachment, that's when the relationship will work. Then you learn to be patient. I put up with his farts. I put up with his toilet seat up. I put up with his coming home late. You understand my point? That's because of patience and kindness and love and compassion. These words are kind of cute, but we understand, you know. But if my attachment and my anger and my jealousy are stronger than my love and my compassion, that's where the nightmares are. And it's sort of an obvious way to put it, but it's kind of profound. So the work is to know myself well, and then once I've decided I'm going to have this relationship, yes, be in love with him, yes, enjoy, but don't live in a fantasy world, which is what attachment causes to do. It's all now totally perfect, he's totally perfect, and then to the extent that you've made him perfect and he's not the poor guy, then how disappointed you'll be when he proves to be a regular person. I mean, it's so mean to dump attachment onto somebody. Do you understand my point? So seeing all these dramas all raging on together, we're not aware of the difference between attachment and love. But it's only when he starts not doing what my attachment wants, that's when the shift happens, you know. That's when the craziness comes. So it's becoming familiar with these crazy stories in there and sorting out the facts from the fictions. Are you with me, people? Yes. So we know these words, but this is the job. Buddha is, I think, an expert at this. Yeah.
Question. And kind of a reflection. So basically, what you were saying, if I understand correctly, please apologize in advance if I don't, is that basically these attachments that we have are basically feeding our ego. So in a sense,
it's like this hungry little eye in there. There's something mean about it. We all recognise it. There's this bottomless pit of never enough, never got enough. So this hunger, this emotional hunger, and looking all out there for something to fill up the gaping hole. Yeah. That's the sad part of us, the neurotic part of us, the ego part of us. Yes.
All right. So it is because it is not my fault. Like I don't want to accept that it's my fault that I fall into this bad relationship, like you guys.
That's right. Well, because my attachment is so needy and so huge that I'm putting this massive expectation that he must fulfill my needs every second. It's like a little vampire. It is. Yeah. Of course, and then when he doesn't, when he's just a normal human guy, then I'll be devastated and get so hurt and blame him and get angry. And it's just not fair to a person. Attachment like this is this monster that over-exaggerates the divineness and good of something, and it's just not accurate. And so I'm blind as a bat. I can't see. And then I blame him. I mean, it's really crazy. You know? We all recognise. You understand?
Yes.
And it's because we go, oh, this is normal. Oh, this is normal. We say we don't look at it. And then because when you go to your therapist, she doesn't look into my attachment or anger. She looks into what happened to me when I was a kid to make me attached and angry. So she's kind of schizophrenic, you know. The Buddhist says just look at the attachment and the anger. Forget what your mummy did to you. They might have been mean. It's true. It's not easy to do this. It's like reversing the energy of a bomb to begin to look into and reconfigure your own thoughts. That's the part that's hard, you know. And that's what that woman on death row did. I mean, it's so outrageous. She couldn't change a damn thing. But she didn't go crazy. She decided to, and this is extreme, you know, but that's the essence of it. But we're obsessed with finding what happened out there to make me this way. It's like getting off the hook, you know. But then we think, well, it's my fault, I'm angry. No, just recognize it and see it's breaking your heart. And actually the Buddhist approach is when we really understood these emotions we've got, we should have compassion for ourselves because they're breaking our heart. Yeah, the world is horrible. The world is awful. There's no doubt about that. You understand? So it's pretty intense. And that's why if you've got any common sense, if let's say we have a difficult relationship, and you're angry and screaming and fighting every day, if you have any self-respect, you'd leave each other before one of you kills each other. You know that 40% of all women on this planet, you know who murders them, who get murdered, you know who murders them, don't you? The bloke in the same bed. 40% of all female people on this planet who get murdered are murdered by the bloke in the same bed. It's not against men. This is about attachment and anger and not having any self-respect and waiting till you kill each other before you realise you've got a problem. You understand? I mean, it's completely demented, you know. And then because I'm one of a Catholic, okay, and you're not supposed to leave a person. But the Buddhist idea is how stupid it is. If it's finished between people and you're going to kill each other, it's the most intelligent thing to do is to get the hell out of there. Isn't it?
Exactly.
It's so common sense.
I agree.
My God. Anyway, excuse me.
I have a question.
Yeah.
But it's in regards to your kids that are not kids anymore. Like I have right now in my life a daughter that is 29, and I am afraid to let her go and be on her own.
I know you. Mothers, when your kid's not 70, you'll be the same. Unless you start changing your attachment. No, darling, this is attachment.
Okay.
This is the nature of this state of mind. So the Buddhist view is, you know, because Buddhism talks about karma, this child comes into your womb. That's pretty personal, isn't it?
Yes.
And the Buddhist view is you didn't make that baby. You just had sex with your husband, I presume your husband, whoever it was, and you provided the egg and sperm. And the mind, this consciousness, this is what the Buddhist view would be, the consciousness of your daughter from past intense history with each other, she came running like a magnet, you know. So you've got this strong history with each other for a start. That's the Buddhist view. We're not going to discuss that tonight. That'll be another day. This is called karma, all this business. So you've already got a strong history with each other. And then she comes along and then because it's, you know, naturally, you've got incredible love and compassion for this person, right? But equal to your love and compassion is also your attachment, which means she's the most divine thing you've ever seen, isn't it? I mean, if you see 1,000 babies, you would never mistake them for yours. You'd always know yours, isn't it? Right. Yours is always best, isn't it? Naturally. I mean, I joke and I say, I'm glad my mother had attachment for me. She would have killed me otherwise. And you can imagine why mothers do kill their babies because they don't have much attachment.
Right.
And nor much love. No wonder, you know, you kill this wretched child, you know. So that attachment is very powerful in a sense. But also there's a virtue there is incredible. The love and compassion, the sense of responsibility that's your job. But at some point, like a wise mother, you've got to, you know, realise, excuse me, she's 29 now.
Yeah.
Okay? So you have to keep it quiet and be very skillful. I mean, know yourself. Our mothers are over us like a rash, you know. You say it in Australia. Do you understand that?
Yes.
All over you like a rash. They're all over you like a rash. Oh, you know, I mean, we know what our mummies are like. With all due respect to our mummies, it's a very hard one.
Yeah.
So you got to be skillful. You got to be wise. Keep the attachment quiet and give the space. But watch like a hawk. You know, maybe your sister, she's suffering. You got to watch like a hawk. Absolutely. But don't intervene unless it's necessary. That's the problem. We all know when we're kids. There's nothing worse than our mother sticking her nose in. You know,
Right.
That's wisdom, and you won't have that if you just follow your attachment. And if you can't distinguish between your attachment or that neediness and that, you know, and the intelligence and the love and the kindness in you, the wisdom in you, attachment is like makes us completely unwise, just like makes us ridiculous. Do you understand?
Yes.
So you've got to get some wisdom and keep it in yourself. It's just, we know, you can't force a person to do something. But you can't stop it. Mothers have attachment to their boys until they're 90, isn't it? There's a 70-year-old son with a 90-year-old mummy, and it's still a little boy, isn't it?
Oh, no.
I can't imagine. So what else, people? Any other questions? Yes.
When we
see that we have the crazy mind,
Yes.
how we calm it.
Well, darling, this
I
is the question.
recognize
Okay,
it.
good. Now,
I
listen,
say,
darling,
I
this is,
meditate or what?
this is the point.
Yes.
You're asking me what to do when you're going 100 miles an hour and your wheels are about to fall off. Can you hear my point? My answer to you is, I'm sorry, dear, it's a bit late. It's not the time to ask. All the best you can do is damage control, and I'm not being sarcastic. When you're in the midst of a huge emotion, that's the wheels falling off. You have to learn from that experience and go back to basics and learn to get maintenance and learn to know your mind and learn to become aware of your thoughts before they get to the mouth. That's the part that I'm talking about. That's the practice every day. It's too late to notice when the emotion is full blown, and that's our problem. We don't notice until then because we're not paying attention to hear. And this is not a mystical idea, it's practical. And that's what takes time. That's what takes time. Do you understand? Yeah.
But so I understand what you're saying, and from my life experience, I know I've had situations where I am very conscious of what I'm feeling. I'm very conscious of my jealousy and the situation. And I remove myself from situations because I'm aware of everything that is happening. But and I guess we're not expecting that to ever go away. It's part of us, right?
No, that's not Buddhism. That's my whole point. Buddhism completely disagrees. We can radically reconfigure our minds and forget the long term of getting rid of all the jealousy and the anger. That's long term. But we can. Okay, I'm not trying to show off and tell you I'm a fancy practitioner. I am not. But this is my job, and I have to talk about it. So I need to try to be authentic. Otherwise, I'd be such a cheat, wouldn't I? Do you understand? Like those, all those Christian ministers who go and talk about having no problem, and then go and sneak behind some of the prostitutes. That's really naughty. You can't be like that. You're schizophrenic. You can't do that. I've got to put my money where my mouth is. You understand? So I'm not trying to say I'm such a great practitioner, but I can tell you with certainty, I have really radically changed by doing the job I'm trying to tell you to do, to talk about, lessening the anger, lessening jealousy, lessening all the neurotic states of mind that were completely natural to me when I was a young kid, up and down like a yo-yo, even when I was 20s and 30s. There's no question. So that's the point. That's the point. You get more clarity, more wisdom, and you slowly are doing the reconfiguring. You're doing this kind of analysis of all the stories that are beneath the emotions. That's when you start to pay attention. You hear the story that anger's saying, the story that jealousy says, the story that attachment. They're cognitive stories. This is like cognitive behavioral therapy, I think. Buddha is a cognitive therapist. I'm really not kidding. But at a deeper level, you listen and you have to have this integrity to want to question your own assumptions. It's questioning your assumptions, not believing in all these stories. Ego is very righteous. I'm allowed to be jealous. He did this. I'm allowed to be angry. She said that. Maybe he really was a creep to me. That still isn't the issue here. It's still my anger. And that's the thing. In our culture, we make an absolute relationship between what he did and my right to be angry. You've got to separate that and cut that. Yes, he was a creep. Yes, he cheated on me. But now let's look at my problem. Look at my jealousy, my tendency to be angry. And then to hear the stories. And slowly, you reconfigure those stories. And that brings more self-respect, more self-confidence, more fulfillment, more happiness, literally. Do you understand? Yeah.
So how do you accomplish that without this aggression towards yourself and the anger?
No, in the beginning you get all a bit holy about it and think, oh, I'm so bad, I shouldn't be angry. But eventually when you start to realize that these things are why I'm suffering, instead of beating yourself up with guilt, it's not that. You begin to kind of have a softness towards yourself, realizing this anger is why I'm suffering. The jealousy is why I'm suffering, not beat myself up for the anger and beat myself up for the jealousy. And I think that's a very deep view we have in the world. It's a very moralistic attitude. Oh, I'm a bad person. That's the irony of ego. We tend to go towards that. But that's not valid either. Guilt is just this worst mental suffering. It's the worst. It's like self-hate. Guilt is I'm a bad person instead of saying he's a bad person. It's anger. So slowly, when you become more familiar, it's hard work because we run to guilt easily and run to self-hate. But to even change those stories because they're not valid. The Buddhist view is we have unbelievable potential. The goodness in us is what is at the core of our being. This other stuff's just rubbish, So that's a crucial part of the change that has to happen. And that means taking more responsibility and more accountable. It also means you're owning your good qualities as much as your bad. If you only own the weeds in your garden, you're very depressed. But if you know your garden's got all this potential for the wonderful flowers, then you're prepared to own the weeds as well. It's easy. Do you understand? So you've got to know your good qualities too. And the irony of ego, we run to the bad qualities. We always, 27 people can tell you you're a nice person and you won't believe it. One person says you're not and you'll believe it. So that shows the irony of our own ego, that we love to hate ourselves. It's kind of weird, you know. So that part of the change, that's part of the change that comes. Do you understand? But we've got to be, and the point is it's all gradual. But this happens slowly. And it is fierce inner work. And I don't mean it's self-centered. You just get, like any job, you get better at it and more skillful. But it takes time, you know. It just takes time. And as long as in Buddha, I'm saying it, Buddha doesn't own these. These words we recognize. So much of therapy these days talks about like this. But the Buddhist approach is really this one at a very profound level, at a much subtler level too. Do you understand what I'm saying? What else? Was it enough for tonight? Yes.
I'm a recovery therapist. I don't know.
Good on you, girl.
So I understand concepts intellectually, and I
Yes,
think that's the thing with Buddhism that's hard is it's easy to understand but harder.
But it's like any theory. No. All theories are easy first, but you can maybe be reading music beautifully, but you can't play Bach well. Excuse me, it needs a bit of patience and time. So it's good to know theory first, but don't be impatient. If you get the theory right, slowly the practice will come.
The idea that we're responsible for just that whole analogy with prison, and I like that because we do create that in our minds, but with the cause and effect and how we tend to attribute how we're feeling to what happened.
Yes, that's right.
Whether now
Yes.
or in the past.
Yes, exactly.
But at the same time, we can't completely ignore
No,
something
you
completely
don't.
atrocious happening.
No, you do not ignore it. No, you do not. It is
deal with
true.
that dialectic. Like, how do you deal with the fact that bad things happen,
Okay.
and we have to deal with our.
I understand that. So the Buddhist approach has got the explanations for why things happen. That's called the law of karma. We haven't gone into that today. But forget that one. Forget that one. That woman on death row was able, somehow from intelligence, her own self-respect, was able to get to that point where the nightmare was still a nightmare. It was the injustice. You can't even imagine the injustice. So that's where for me, the incredible courage it needs, when she really could not get them to believe that she was innocent, even had killed her husband. But she still was able to see, out of self-respect, that she could think differently. It's enormous. I mean, that to me is the most outrageous example of all. But it's just really hard. It's not easy. It doesn't. So the interesting point was too, she didn't ever stop working on her freedom. She never stopped trying to get freedom. So she didn't sit there passively. Oh well, it's just I can't do anything about it. No, keep working on it. If you feel sometimes it's not worth it. If you, let's say, you're accused of something at work, and you can absolutely try to get justice. Meanwhile, try to keep your own sanity, which is not easy. But at some point, sometimes we do realise there is nothing you can do. For her, the bonus was the end. She did get out. But it might not have happened. Many people do not get out of death row when they're still innocent. They get even executed. So that's when it's really hard.
So don't do it from a place of anger. Do it
No,
from a place of
it's
peace
right.
and
It's correct. That's one of the thing about the Tibetans. It's very interesting. A friend of mine, I mean, if you don't know much about Tibetan history, but you know, the Tibetans, because this view is coming from, this is Buddhist, right? So these Tibetans live that way. And also because they have the view of karma, which is really powerful in their minds. That's just part of their worldview. That was part of the Indian worldview. It's been around for thousands of years, the view of karma, reincarnation, we create our own reality. It's a very powerful view. The idea of a creator for them is the weirdest thing they've ever heard. Do you understand? It just doesn't exist for them. Their worldview is this view that for us is so weird, that you create yourself. You come from past lives. Every single thing you think of, do, and say produces who you are. All your happiness is from your own virtue. All your suffering is from your own past lives. It's a hugely vast view dealt in great depth in all literature. So that's in their bones, just like the creative views in our bones. You understand what I'm saying? So that's very natural for the Tibetans. So then there's these two stories, I'll say, that express what I'm trying to get at. This there's two young Tibetan nuns. They were in 2003. Richard Gere, as you know, is a Buddhist. He invited the Dalai Lama to New York, and he also was. We were negotiating about doing. I was working for the prison project, and we were discussing maybe doing some kind of collaborating on some prison something, but it didn't happen. But in the end, he invited 20 former prisoners, all of whom had done some kind of meditation, to come to New York and meet the Dalai Lama. It was a very moving, and he invited people like me, It was a very moving day. It was a whole cross-section of Americans, like Latino, Puerto Ricans, Mexicans, black, white, male, female, the whole works, a whole bunch of Americans. So it was a very moving day. They all talked about their suffering and their dramas. They met the Dalai Lama. It was a lovely, lovely day. So he also invited two young Tibetan nuns. So, in Tibet, there's like more than 1 million, over the last 40 years, more than 1.5 million of the 6 million Tibetans have been killed. Terror, in prison, they're still being in prison, still being terror, blah, 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 blah. So it's a pretty intense story, history. So these young women had been like young women, like 20s, but been like a lot of them, been little nuns since they're kids, having this view of karma as their default mode of the universe, having all this view of the mind, their practices. So then they were sexually abused and tortured in prison, right? So they were telling their story. So I think the first point was, it was surprising to the Americans. They weren't angry, and that's very surprising. We don't trust that in our culture. But if you, I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but if you analyse, that's what I'm getting at before, if you analyse the conceptual story that informs anger, speak anger, what anger's saying, isn't it, is how dare you do that to me, I don't deserve it. Would we agree that that's the voice of anger? Mm-hmm. And it's very powerful and righteous. So that's why that guy, the other guy I read about on death row, he was out of his brain with that. And that feels so absolutely right. And it is, if you think about it, put it this way. If you have a materialist view, which is the philosophical view of our culture, that you're made by your mother in the womb, right? Made by God or your mother. Either way, your mummy and daddy create you if you're a materialist, and if you're a Christian, God made you, didn't he? So in either case, would you agree you began in your mother's womb, didn't you? So from that perspective, speaking quite literally here, then you are an innocent victim. They never met those Chinese guards. They did nothing to harm them. And so anger is a perfect response. How dare you do that to me? I don't deserve it. You would agree with that, wouldn't you? And that's the view we have as the truth. That I've never met this rapist in the street. I got, one time something happened to me. I've never met this guy before. So naturally you'd think, how dare you do that to me? I don't deserve it. That's completely spontaneous and it's perfectly true if you began in your mother's womb. Well, the Buddhists say you didn't begin in your mother's womb. Your mind goes back and back and back. You've had countless lives. We've bumped into each other countless times. It's a very different view, okay? So they had that view in their mind. So then they didn't have anger. They would never have the thought, how dare you do that to me, I don't deserve it. This sounds shocking to us, but that doesn't fit in their philosophy. It's not in their mind, in their psychology. Most Tibetans, the Dalai Lama said, they're just really patient people because they don't have the concept of anger. Can you hear my point here? Because their philosophy is so completely different, and it's just the way they've lived for thousands of years. So they didn't have anger because of this. So that's shocking for the Americans. So anyway, my point is this, getting to that. They then said, there were tears. And then they said, and of course, we had compassion for our torturers because we knew we must have harmed them in the past and that because they will suffer in the future because of what they do. That's the concept of karma, that everything that's called happiness is the fruit of your own virtue. You create the happiness, but you also create the suffering. I mean, it's a very different concept from us. It's quite shocking, But that's the view of karma, and that's the view in their minds. That's their philosophy. So on that basis, there's no anger, and there's even the ability to have forgiveness and compassion. So that's why the Dalai Lama is a good example. I mean, people, you know the Dalai Lama. He's like this happy guy. People have seen him for 60 years. He hasn't, like that woman on death row, he hasn't stopped for 60 years trying to make Tibet better. He doesn't sit back there, oh, well, it's all karma, Rubbish. He has not stopped diplomatically, politically, socially, in every way possible, trying to make it better for Tibetans. He never gives up, but he's a happy guy. He doesn't have anger. He doesn't have neurosis. He's not freaked out. He doesn't have stress and PTSD and all those other things that we have. Do you understand what I'm saying? Which seems almost inconceivable to us. Anyway, chatting away here. Are we communicating? Yes. So this is full on, That's why I say for me, a Buddhist, I kind of jumped in the deep end. Ever since a kid, I was a Catholic. I was in love with God, but I was the naughtiest kid in the whole family, So I was all getting into trouble. But I loved God, I loved Our Lady, loved the saints. I was going to be a nun like Saint Teresa of Lisieux. I was like in heaven, but I was naughty. So then I became a hippie, gave up God, and decided to have boys. That was in the 60s, right? Then I was always looking for a way to see the world. That's how I felt it, very strongly. So I gave up the Catholic, was hippie, sex, drugs and jazz and like rock and roll. Then I was into communist politics, a communist in London in the 60s, and then black politics, supporting all I was working with the prison project that dealt with all the Black Panthers and everything in America. And then feminist, and then I was being radical. I kind of Then I became a radical feminist. I heard about radical. Oh, that's nice. I like that. Then I naturally became a radical feminist. I gave up the boys and became a radical lesbian feminist. Then I became a radical lesbian separatist feminist. I don't even know if you've even heard of them. All men were the cause of suffering. So anyway, I joke and I say by that point I've exhausted all options for who to blame, you know. When I was a Catholic, it was all the non-Catholics. Then I was a hippie, it was all the straight people. Then I was a communist, it was all the left, the rich people. Then it was all the white people. Then it was all the male people. So I literally exhausted all options by the time I got here. So then I bumped into these Tibetan lamas and they said you should look at your mind. And that was a brand new idea. I'd never heard of that before. So I've been doing that ever since. Anyway, I jumped in the deep end is what I'm getting at. So the karmic one for me has been huge. And then when I first heard it, it was like a missing piece of my life. It was very powerful for my mind. For me, mainly because for me, I don't know, if you have faith in the Creator, I'm very happy for you. I'm not criticising. But I just like the idea that I created myself, you know. I like the idea that I created the cause to be who I am. That means I can change. I like being in charge. That was a very nice idea for me. Do you understand what I'm saying? I mean, I'm joking, but that's another whole discussion. We'll discuss that later in the week. Probably the weekend or something. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Is it time to go home? The clock you gave me doesn't work, okay? It's useless. So what time is it?
It's 5 minutes till 9.
Well, it's time to go home, isn't it? Isn't it time to go home?
9:30. 9:30.
Okay. Oh, 9:30. Oh, you're more like Spain, you people, aren't you? The Spaniards start their teachings at 9:30. They have their dinner at 11. You like that too? Not like the Brits who start at 6. So any more questions, you people? Come on. Yes, sweetheart.
I don't know if I missed this.
Yeah, go on.
But what is your definition or the Buddhist definition of love? I understand attachment.
Yes, I hear you. Love is under the positive heading. It's altruistic. It's connected to others. It's completely virtuous. It's the bare bones is when he's happy, I delight in his happiness and I want him to be happy. And I'm really going to practice love. I'll even find a way to make him happy. It's completely pure and perfect. But we rarely have pure love, and we rarely have only pure attachment. If we had, like I said, if you only had attachment, you'd be a vampire. So luckily, our love tempers our attachment, if we're fortunate, you know. So they always come together. That's why they're mixed together. It's a big problem. But love is altruistic and valid and reasonable and delights in the happiness of others and wants to make them happy. And then compassion is seeing their suffering and empathizes with their suffering and wants to help them. They're the ones we're trying to grow. And attachment and anger and the others drag those down. And that's why it's so important to be able to have this wisdom to distinguish when these emotions are all fully blown together, to be able to distinguish the rubbish from the good stuff. That's the part that's really tricky. And it's really tricky to know, to trust your own motives, you know. When you think it's coming out of love for him when I say something to him, but it's just coming from my own neediness. And we can be so manipulative, so tricky. Ego can be so tricky, you know. So it demands a lot of integrity, a lot of self-awareness. That's the skill. You understand? And then you can learn to then follow the love instead of following the attachment, and that's the practice every day. Put up with this farts, and you understand what I'm saying. Excuse me, I'm sure you don't fart in the toilet. You understand? Words, excuse me. But I mean, this is, you know, it doesn't take much to make you go crazy with each other. The tiniest thing that it builds up, doesn't it? And because we're so impatient. In the beginning, it's all lovey-dovey. Oh, darling, don't do that. Because he wants to make me happy. He won't. But in the end, he gets so fed up, you know, because we're always at each other. That's what attachment causes. It's so sneaky, you know. It can look like love. It can look like kindness. And that's why the attachment of a mother is very hard to distinguish from the love. It's very hard to see. But even for your brother, I mean, you know, let's say you've got an alcoholic brother, and you really do have compassion for your brother. It's true, you do. But we don't realise that our own, you see, attachment, almost one way of putting it, it's like this junkie in me that is frantic to get what I want every second, and it just can't stand problems. Attachment's like a child. It has a panic attack the moment a problem comes. So I do have compassion for my brother. That's valid. But it's completely polluted by my attachment because he's pissing me off because he's making my life unhappy. You understand? Attachment gets very upset. So then I manipulate, thinking I'm being so kind to him, but I'm not. I'm trying to manipulate him to do what my attachment wants. So that means that you stick your nose in where it doesn't belong, but you're lying to yourself, thinking it's compassion. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's very tricky. So sometimes just, you know, real compassion would be you see his suffering, but you know he doesn't want your advice. You can't bully him to do it. You love him for who he is. Your heart will break. But you know you'll have when you know if he does want your advice, you'll be able to give it to him. But we stick our nose. Attachment makes us stick our nose in where it doesn't belong. That's so common, and because that's the part that makes us distressed. But we think he's making us distressed, but it's not. It's our own neediness and our own anger that makes us distressed. That's the part that's hard to see. So to know to shut our mouths is very hard sometimes. Do you understand? It just demands. It's like learning any skill. You have to learn it. It's like you got to learn how to do things. It's just learning a new job to become super familiar with all the subtlety of all these stories in our own crazy mind. And we all do it to some extent. We all know what I'm talking about. But I would only say it this way: that this is the emphasis in Buddhist practice. This is the real skill you learn in Buddhist practice. But often it's unfortunately not taught like that. It's all about mindful and just be watching your breath and kind of walking around looking like a holy person, which is ridiculous. It's really ridiculous. It's very cliched. Anyway, what else?
I have
Yeah.
like a story kind of with you because I'm pretty new in Buddhism. I've been a Buddhist for 2 years, and I've been watching you in your videos. And one day you were talking about how we as humans blame our parents. Like it's your fault that I did this and that.
Yes.
And I just wanted to hide under my bed because for years I blamed my father because I came to the United States when I was 16 years old, and it's his fault, it's his fault.
I see, yeah, it's very typical, isn't it?
So
well, there you go. I'm glad.
when you said that, I was like, oh my God.
Oh, I'm glad you saw it. Good, well done, girl. So back there, somebody had their hand. Yes, sweetheart, go.
Well, so grief from loss, is that attachment?
I think it's a whole mixture. It's a word. I know if I look at the kind of the list of the saints of mind in Buddhist psychology, the basic ones, they don't have a thing called grief. So I think for us, it's a mixture. So I'd say for sure, if I'm in love with my dear Hanan, really in love and he's a kind, good man, then he dies. But grief will be unbearable, of course it will. Or like a child dying. It's a mixture. Okay, put it this way. If I didn't have a close attachment relationship with him, you wouldn't have grief. So the grief is also kindness and compassion and sadness, which is valid, but it's only because it's an attachment relationship. So the attachment is this pain of the loss, my personal loss. And that's not being mean about it. That's why it's really important not to hear this as criticism of yourself. When we recognise we've all got this, we'll be happy to own them all, but not to beat ourselves up for it. But of course it's because of attachment. And some people, will never get over it. I remember, some people, if it's mainly attachment and they don't have much self-respect, they'll never heal. And then they'll feel guilty about trying to love someone else and always feel it's almost virtuous to feel bad and to be miserable and sad and depressed. That's really when it's self-piteous. And it's not being unkind, though. These words sound so cruel sometimes. This is why we suffer. But it's also because, I know the Dalai Lama, for example. Let's assume he is at the level of not having attachment, the way we're talking here, let's just say. When he talked about his mum, he'd be in tears. But you'd say if there's no attachment there, it would just because you remember her and her wonderful qualities and you just miss her presence. But it wouldn't be sustained. He'd crack a joke a minute later because it's not like the piece of his heart is broken. That's when it's really attachment, when you just can never heal. Do you understand? And I think that's very painful because when people, if he dies, the heart, you just can't believe you can exist. But then before you know it, you start looking at other men, then you feel guilty. And then suddenly before you've sort of forgotten him in a way. But we shouldn't feel guilty. This is human nature, It's just natural. It's okay. Yes.
It's in regards with the same line of questions.
Yeah.
I have a friend right now that I want to, if you can give me a few words to her. She have lost everyone around her.
Really?
In the last 20 years.
Yes.
Father, brother, sister, granddaughter. And 2 weeks ago, her daughter, and a few other people.
Yes,
I'm scared to be close to her.
No, I understand. Yeah.
But it's really terrible. It's really
so she just doesn't cope. You mean she's not able to cope?
She hates God and she hates.
So she's blaming God.
Of course.
Oh my
She says
God.
I was, in my knees all day.
Oh
praying.
my God.
Her daughter died 2 weeks ago of the flu.
Oh wow.
3 weeks before, a month ago, she was in a restaurant having fun. She got the flu.
Yeah.
Went to the hospital and it turned to pneumonia 3 days later, and 3 weeks later, she died.
Oh, she died.
The daughter.
Oh, the daughter died of the same one. Oh my God.
So yeah, it's terrible,
It is terrible.
She's asking me for a few words, anything Now she said, "Well, I guess I'm gonna turn to Buddhism." It's the only one that it makes a little bit of sense because God is an asshole.
But is she? But I know.
you know,
funny.
only.
It's terrible, isn't it? I agree.
You know,
But I mean, I don't know.
I have no words to say.
But I just think you don't try to heal her. Just love her for who she is. Just love her. I don't think there's any point in giving you advice until she's ready, and she will find it when she wants. But just love her and just say, I know sometimes it's hard to understand why things happen, but you know, this is life. But you can become strong from it. You're a good person. Try and say positive, optimistic things. She mightn't hear it. You know, I mean, there's no point in lecturing her, is what I'm saying. You can't. Sometimes you just can't help except just to love her. Is she a good friend, or you just avoid her now because it's just too depressing?
No, she's my aunt.
Oh, it's your aunt. Okay. I see. You do love her, sort of?
Yeah, even though I didn't see her much, she was traveling and everything.
I think don't try to cure her. Just tell her, I know life's difficult. I really understand, darling. Blah blah blah. But just love her who she is. Give her a hug, and you know. And if she wants to keep hating God, what can you do?
Yeah.
What can you do? It's like difficult, isn't it? There's no point giving you a lecture on how being angry
Yeah,
is
the thing is
happy.
funny. She's asking, like, say something Buddhist. She's not telling
Oh no, just
say something nice.
oh, just tell her something. Just be optimistic. Don't just give her love. Give her love. I think just love her who she is.
Yeah.
Don't even give her lectures.
Yeah, no, that's I should avoid to talk about those things because it's not a point for me. I mean, I can heal her or I can.
No, you can't. But you can just show her affection. That's it. And if she might get something from it, she might get some nourishment from it. That's all we can do sometimes. When a person's so overwhelmed, and often we have a wish to wish we could heal them, but you can't always. You can't, the right answers. Don't even try to give her answers. Just tell her you love her. Tell her she's a good person. What else, people? Yeah.
I have a more technical question.
Yeah.
A friend of mine who may be joining us on Thursday asked me, what is the difference between this lineage and the Vajrayana, Mahayana?
Yeah.
I know it's complex, but can you give us a top line just so we understand?
In the world, it's called Buddhism. Okay.
And why you chose this one?
Oh, okay. In the world, it's called Buddhism. That's Buddhism. Then you've got Hinayana Buddhism and Mahayana Buddhism. So those they're different mainly in terms of the goal. So in Hinayana Buddhism, the goal is to achieve your own liberation, which is the job we're discussing in this room. And so you sort of like you graduated high school. But then you got there's a nice analogy in Buddhism. A bird needs two wings, wisdom and compassion. Well, here we're discussing the wisdom wing. So if you graduated high school, which is really the wisdom wing, junior school and high school, that's when you achieve your own nirvana. That's the Buddhism in Thailand and Burma and countries like that. Then you can go to another Mahayana. Is you go to high school, you go to university. That's the compassion wing. And now even though you don't need to come back, you keep coming back to help others. Speaking simply, that's the Mahayana one. Okay. Then within the Mahayana, you've got the Buddhism of Tibet, which is including the esoteric level, which is called Tantra or Vajrayana, and that all of it comes from India. So junior school and high school is the wisdom wing, and that's in Thailand and Burma. Junior school, high school, and university is in Taiwan and China and Japan. Junior school, high school, university, and postgraduate is in Tibet.
No.
Okay, that's the answer. Does that help?
Yeah, I'll watch the video.
Okay. No, this is the indication that this is the Vajrayana Buddhism. These dudes.
Because it's more
That's the esoteric level, the most sophisticated esoteric level of Buddhist psychology, put it that way. And that's really only extant in Tibet. Nowhere else. That's extant in Tibet. The Mahayana teachings of the compassion and bodhisattvas is the practice is China and Japan, and the Hinayana is Taiwan and Buddhist. So there's Hinayana, junior school, high school, Taiwan, and you achieve your own nirvana. This is what we're talking about here. If you finish this job, you're out of here. You don't come back. Then you got the compassion wing, where you continue to come back to help others, even though you don't need to. It's out of compassion. And then you got the esoteric level, which is sort of the speedy part, to help you become a Buddha very quickly. That's the Vajrayana, and that's only extant in Tibet. Tantrayana or Vajrayana.
East to west. It keeps going west as you go up.
Huh? Oh, it must be
East to
now.
west.
Yes, and now it's in the west. So now it's all got confused. Something like that. And why I chose it, I fell into their laps. My first teachings are from the people who are my teachers now, so I just fell into the system that worked for me. What can I say? I didn't choose it in a sense,
Yeah, most people, I always ask, and it seems to be like, you found me, I found it.
Yeah, I mean, because I'd say about the Tibetan Buddhist one, which is the Vajrayana as well, but it includes also the junior school, high school, and university. It's a monastic university system where they study the philosophy 20, 30, 40 years. And I in my life, I wanted that. I wanted the other aspects of it, but I wanted the philosophy. I wanted the big picture. I wanted the worldview. Buddhism really is a worldview. That's only really extant and taught in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, which also happens to be Vajrayana. That's why it suits me. What can I say?
So Vajrayana is under Mahayana.
Yes. No, Vajrayana is the extension of Mahayana.
Extension.
Yes, it's an extension.
You learn one and then you
Yes,
evolve
yes.
into the other.
And so if you enter into the Vajrayana, you do your junior school, high school, university, postgraduate. You go all the way. It's all part of it. You can't just have one piece.
But he has a more mystical.
It's got, well, you could say it's that. You could say like that. You could say like that. Yeah. Okay. I think it's enough. Food for thought. I always say I always say this is so silly. That in Brisbane years ago at our centre there, they invited 3 of us nuns, and a whole bunch of us were living up beyond there. They invited us to come and give talks on Tuesday night or something, 3 talks, and they were 90 minutes. 3 of us nuns, each of us had 90 minutes, and they transcribed the teachings. And the other 2 nuns were 8 pages, and mine were 24. So it's now about midnight in terms of the amount of words I've said for normal people. That's all I'm trying to say. You understand my point? That was meant to be funny.
Yes.
Okay, you people.
Thank you.
I've got no voice left. So I got an advertisement. Did we do the CDs out there? No. Oh, I got 2 advertisements. One is a pilgrimage. If ever you thought of going to India and Nepal, come with me in October or before you die. You'll love it. It's very special. It's 2 to 3 weeks, about nearly 3 weeks, and it raises money for our prison project. We're doing it since 2001, and I never get bored. We started in Kathmandu. We go to the places where the Buddha went in India. It's really special, very special. People love it. That raises money for the prison project. Those postcards are there. Excuse me. That's all. Good night. And bye bye. See you next time. Thank you, people.